Right. Okay. So this episode, I want to talk about how to talk to your GP. And on average, a woman needs to go to a GP 7 times before they're actually listened to, validated, acknowledged, or even reached a conclusion of what potentially they're experiencing, what their symptoms are doing to them, etc., etc. Now, there's certain types of language that you need to use. Now, I previously mentioned that it's like you're going to a lawyer or a judge with a case to present to them of your symptoms to make a solid case for them to listen to your symptoms and for it to be validated. It sucks. Like, it's really unfair that not only when we are experiencing PMDD symptoms, which are debilitating and hugely compromising the quality of our lives, that we now have to go fight our case in front of a GP so we can be heard. In the defense of GPs, they are general practitioners. Clues in the title, general. And it also doesn't help that we have a very misogynistic healthcare system that doesn't support or facilitate or educate these healthcare practitioners to have the awareness and the education or training that they need to be able to recognise these symptoms in women and be able to signpost them to the relevant treatment that they need to support them in being able to live a better quality of life. So I think the first stage with PMDD is that you need to have at least a minimum of 3 months symptoms tracking cycle. Now, so many people have those apps on their phones. And I think the important part is you're able to identify when you start ovulating. So we have our 4 stages of our cycle. We've got menstruation, follicular, ovulation, and then luteal. I forgot it then. Sorry, needed to take a second. But with those 4 stages of our cycle, if you're able to pinpoint, okay, I started my cycle on this date of my period, and then by day 14, I started ovulating, and then they'll say, how do you know you were ovulating? Then you can say to them that my mood started to dip, I became very lethargic, my moods were fluctuating, I felt like I was becoming quite withdrawn, I was feeling very, like, I just wasn't myself. And then the week after, when you are starting to enter luteal, which I call Hell Week, by the way. I mean, I'm supposed to change the language around it and call it Challenge Week, but, you know, semantics. But ultimately, that's Hell Week, or the luteal phase, is basically a very key indication of PMDD because that's when the severity of the symptoms show up. And that is what you need to communicate to your GP, the importance of it and how it compromises the quality of your life. And that's what you need to focus on by being very clear that it actually compromises the quality of your life. It's difficult for you to do day-to-day tasks. It's hard for you to go to work. It's hard for you to do the school run. It's hard for you to go to school, college, uni. It's hard for you to focus. And as women, we make up at least a large percentage of society. And we're all living lives. We're mums, we're daughters, we're aunties, we're sisters, we're wives. We have careers. Some people are doing all of those at the same time. And it doesn't mean that just because we're holding it all together, that it's completely acceptable for us to continue in that way until we burn out. Gone are the days where we need to be martyrs of society, carrying the burden of suffering and thinking it's normal. It isn't normal, and it is really triggering for me. When I go to the GP or when I do speak to a healthcare practitioner, they'll be like, oh, that's normal. No, it's not normal. I think I've become quite desensitized to it over the years where I have spoken to practitioners or healthcare providers, should I say. So it doesn't trigger me as such. But when I hear the stories from women who DM me asking me, well, like, what do I do? Like, how do I speak to my GP? I feel this sense of rage on their behalf because it's a huge injustice and a disservice for women to have to live a compromised quality of life because of lack of education, lack of awareness. And this is why I feel like it's really important to do what I'm doing with raising the awareness, with empowering people to be able to advocate for themselves. So the first few times when I did go to the GP, I went on my own. I mean, I can't remember the last time anyone did go with me until I was going to a private clinic to get specific treatment for PMDD. But when I did go to the GP on the first few occasions, my GP outright asked me, like, oh, are you stressed? And, you know, you're like, no shit, Sherlock. I am stressed because hormonal fluctuations are basically crippling me. And at that stage, I was experiencing suicidal ideations. So at that point, I was wrestling with going on antidepressants because of taboo, because of shame, because of the fact that it felt like I was having to surrender, like truly surrender to this condition. Because as women, we're very, very strong. And I'd like to pride myself to think I'm fairly resilient. I've experienced depression and anxiety before and I came through it and I had no medicinal intervention. But one thing I had to surrender to was that you can't fight hormones. You cannot. Now, when accepting your fate with being able to surrender to the battle of hormones and their fluctuations, there's no shame in it. And I was very lucky. I have an amazing support system. And my best friend, I honestly printed off the treatment guidelines. And she lived in the Netherlands at the time. And she saw me on my journey from going to this really enthusiastic person with a zest to life to being a complete shell. Because there were times that I would disappear for 2 weeks. 2 weeks, I would not speak to anyone, barely anyone, because I didn't recognize myself. I was so withdrawn. I was crying uncontrollably. I was having panic attacks. I was just surviving. I was constantly in survival mode. And it was so exhausting that I didn't have the capacity to engage with anyone, especially my best friend, who is my soulmate. She's my best friend. And we know how we like to talk to our best friends every single day. Like a day doesn't go by that we don't speak to them. So it was very odd for her. And she was so patient. And when I was going through the guidelines and I said, look, some of the first stages of the treatment pathway for PMDD is self-care. As patronizing as that sounds, it is a very crucial part as well when navigating this demonic condition. You need to implement and make time and make space for self-care. I will talk about how I do that in another episode, but today I just want to focus on how to speak to your GP, and you have the knowledge and the understanding and the background of how to be able to present yourself to your GP to get the outcome that you want. Now, putting the self-care aside and taking life a little bit easy, I had two options. It was either going on antidepressants, which is known as SSRIs, or going on the pill, whether it be a progesterone-only pill or whether it be a contraceptive pill. Either way, I was like, I needed to choose my heart. It was being stuck in a place of choosing between a rock and a hard place. I've tried the pill previously when I had polycystic ovarian syndrome. It was synthetic. It went down like a lead balloon. It made me crazy. It made me absolutely psychotic, even more than I was feeling crazy. So that wasn't an option for me because the synthetic nature of the pill just wasn't for me. So I had to be open-minded to being able to start taking antidepressants. And I think it was with the support that I had from my best friend. And she said to me, look, does it matter? Does it really matter what society thinks? What is the culture around it? What is the message around it? What do people think? She was like, it doesn't matter. What matters is that if you are going to take medication to support you to be able to live a better quality of life, i.e. eliminate my suicidal ideations, that's all that matters. Because it's a really scary place to be in when you are experiencing suicidal ideations, because one day you end up acting upon it. And that's what I did. At one point, I did end up acting upon it. And that is not something I'm proud of. But why did it have to reach that point in the first place for me to do that? Because I didn't have the support from a medicinal perspective or as a medical intervention. But such is life. Here we are. And this is why I feel like it's really important for me to stress that if you are considering or thinking about going on antidepressants, there's no shame in it. I did it. I've been on it for about 6 years. I'm no longer on antidepressants, but that's because I'm on a different form of treatment for PMDD, and that's taking effect. And for that reason, my suicidal ideations have eliminated. So therefore, I've titrated myself off of it. So I no longer need it. But did I consistently take it for 6 years before this treatment happened? Absolutely. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I would scream it from the rooftops because it eliminated my suicidal ideations. And that is not a fun place to be in when you are experiencing that. 2 weeks of the month, that's 6 months of the year. So I feel like I lost out of the 6 years, maybe 3.5 years of my life because I was still experiencing that with PMDD. But when I started increasing my dosage for antidepressants and it started really taking effect, it did improve managing the symptoms a lot better, because any less symptom is better than experiencing all the symptoms at the same time. So I'm very much a glass half full instead of a glass half empty person. So this is why I would always encourage someone, if they are thinking about using SSRIs or antidepressants, please don't hesitate. But I will also add another caveat to this. Now, this isn't medical advice. This is something that I have experienced firsthand. Now, when I did start my journey with taking antidepressants, I don't know about you, but many who have started taking them, there's a disclaimer from the GP and they will say, you're going to feel a lot worse before you start feeling a lot better. But they don't actually explain why. The reason why you start feeling worse before you start feeling better is that for the first 2 weeks, when you start taking antidepressants, what it does, it blocks your serotonin. So the serotonin is basically, which is released from your brain to help you feel better and keep things ticking over. Now, if that is blocked and you start taking your antidepressants in Hell Week, which is your luteal phase, it will push you over the edge. But GPs don't tell you that. They just give you the pill and wish you all the best. And that's a really scary thing. And when women have DM'd me and they have asked me, they've offered me citalopram, or they've offered me sertraline or Zoloft. There's so many variations. So I started off with citalopram and it did not suit me. And unfortunately, it did push me over the edge, and I started taking it in my luteal phase, which was my Hell Week. And I did act upon my suicidal ideations. Very scary place to be in, but I was still very lucky. I have the right support around me. But it was that realization that really shocked me to my core, because after I did carry out that act, the next day I came on my period. I called one of my childhood friends who is a psychiatrist, and she suggested, it wasn't even a suggestion, it was a directive. She said to me, I need you to call the crisis team. I absolutely need you to call the crisis team. And I did. I called the crisis team and they said to me, not much, to be honest. What they did actually, I heard more Googling over the phone than I had any constructive or helpful feedback or any support. So, which is ironic. And they didn't know what PMDD was when I told them. And I think after that phone call, when I repeated 17 times what PMDD was and what I was going through, because I was pushed from pillar to post when all these mental health nurses were trying to assess me and they didn't know what it was, it was really, really frustrating. And that's when my journey began. After I got off the phone to them, I said, I can't have this. Like, I can't, in my own conscience, I can't allow another woman to feel as alone as I did when I was going through Hell Week and experiencing such difficult suicidal ideations. So I did go back to my GP after that, and I informed them that, look, that was a terrible choice and terrible advice that you'd given me, because of course I'd realised that it had blocked even more of my serotonin, which dips significantly during your luteal phase, hence why you start experiencing those suicidal ideations. And then any remnants or like small drops of serotonin that I did have left in my system also became blocked when I started taking citalopram. So they acknowledged it. There wasn't an apology, not that I was expecting one. But ultimately, they started me on sertraline, and I slowly built myself up. Now, there's some women out there who will only need to take their antidepressants when they start ovulating. So they will only take it for 2 weeks of the month. So there's some people who don't even need it that often. So if you're taking it for 2 weeks during, like, when you start ovulating, that's fine. You come on your period, you feel fine. You don't need to take it. That's also very, very common. But I just want to stress, if you are considering it, please do not take it when you are in your luteal phase. I would recommend starting your journey with antidepressants when you start your period, because that's when your serotonin levels begin to climb. And as that is climbing, even if the serotonin from taking the antidepressants when you're starting your journey with it is blocked, at least you will be safe. And that's what's really important, the safety element of it. And unfortunately, till this day, I've not heard one GP. There hasn't been one GP who's actually stressed this or mentioned it, which is disappointing, but it's women's health, right? Who cares about women's health? So that aspect I wanted to really elaborate on when it comes down to taking antidepressants. But the second part is the synthetic pill. It works for some, it doesn't work for others. But for many, it does work. I have my own bias because it's synthetic. I've also had my own really challenging experiences with it. But the synthetic nature of it masking your symptoms of your hormones isn't something that I am personally comfortable with. If anyone else is, that is up to you. That is a personal choice, and I completely respect that. But myself personally, I wasn't big on a synthetic pill as a form of treatment. So these are the first initial stages of the treatment pathway for PMDD. And following on from that, if that fails, then it leads on to HRT. Now, HRT is hormone replacement therapy, and it comes in so many different variations. You've got things like bioidentical ones, which is basically made from plants, and they've used the genetic makeup of a plant matching the human version of it, so it's not synthetic in nature. You can get patches, you can get gels, progesterone only pill. So you have that as well, and that does support the symptoms, but on a very temporary basis. So I started HRT maybe at least 4 years about 4 years into my journey with PMDD. And at this point, I'd been taking antidepressants only and trying to take life easy. Didn't quite work, but, I tried. I did make lifestyle changes. I did all of those things. But, PMDD is a beast and it needs to be treated accordingly. So when I did start my journey with HRT, I was on I still am. I'm still on estrogen patches and progesterone only pills, which I take cyclically. And I felt like they only temporarily masked my symptoms. I felt great for a few months, and then guess what? It was back. So I just want to make clear in managing expectations that so many of us women, when we start these treatments, we're so enthusiastic and in such hope that it's going to work and it's going to remedy everything and it's going to fix it all. The thing is, as we're getting older, so many of us are experiencing perimenopause, which is menopause symptoms, but a lot earlier. You can start it as early as in your early 30s, unless you have something like POI, which is premature ovarian insufficiency, which means that your menopause actually starts a lot earlier. I am not an expert in that. I don't know much about it. So if that's something you do want to look up, I would highly recommend it. But when it came down to perimenopause, I know that I started experiencing perimenopause in my maybe mid to late 30s. I'm currently 41 and I'm in full-blown menopause. Full-blown menopause being I have chemically induced my menopause because the HRT wasn't quite doing what it needed to do to manage my PMDD. It was like a very temporary plaster. So after a lot more challenges managing it, I actually took it upon myself with a lot of support and guidance from people or someone that was actually in chemical menopause and said, like, look, it's completely transformed the quality of my life and I really want the same for you. So I decided with a heavy heart that I was going to do it. Now, what that looks like is I have injections called GnRH analog. So after HRT, the next stage is GnRH analog injections. And essentially what they do is they block your hormones. And that will reduce the fluctuations significantly. I still experience them, by the way. I still have periods. I'm an exception. And I know there's many others out there who also still experience periods because once you are on GnRH analog injections, what that does, it blocks your ovaries from ovulating. And in essence, it's going to sort of like block the fluctuation so you don't really experience PMDD. Some people, it completely eliminates their periods. And unfortunately, I'm not one of the chosen people. I have add back HRT, which you have to be able to support your bone function. As women, we need estrogen, we need testosterone, we need progesterone to protect our womb and our lining, our brain function. There's so many functions that all of these hormones have. It's not just limited to us having babies or carrying babies and having periods. It has so many other functions too. So I'm currently the stage where I'm at GnRH analogs and I have add back HRT. The only way that I was able to access this treatment was not with my GP, by the way. So if you think that if you are considering exploring having this as a treatment for PMDD, first and foremost, you've got to go through the treatment pathway. You've got to go through all the stages and demonstrate that it's not working for you. And it's always trial and error. Some people it works, some people it doesn't. Some people still feel like they have PMDD, like I do on some cycles, but they're able to manage it and navigate it better because they get a little bit of respite, because it's not as the symptoms aren't as relentless as they are usually. But it's very, very individual and it is subject to how each person responds. But if you are in a place where you've gone through all the treatment pathway or you followed the pathway for all the treatment to manage your PMDD, it means that you've been referred to either a gynecologist or Chelsea and Westminster or a clinic that specialises in menopause, either privately or on the NHS, to be able to gain the treatment that you need at that stage. GPs will only issue the treatment up until either the pill or antidepressants. If you've got a good GP, they will explore HRT, but there are so many challenges when it comes down to HRT because of the lack of education and training with GPs on the importance of HRT. A lot of women, when they go to their GP and say, I'd like HRT because I believe I'm perimenopausal, they will say, okay, let's send you for a blood test. And then they'll send you for a blood test and the results will be like, it's come back normal. Like, this normal is always coming back normal. But they're not treating you based on your symptoms. They're treating you based on what the bloods are saying. And the bloods aren't always accurate. So a good GP will treat you according to the symptoms that you're presenting as opposed to what the blood tests are presenting. So many women have had to take it upon themselves to go to private clinics or be referred to a menopause clinic on the NHS to be able to have access to HRT. And what the clinic will do is, once you've got an appointment with them, they will go and review like your symptoms, what you're experiencing, and then write to your GP, prescribing you with HRT. Some GPs are good, many are not so much. And I know this sounds like this is a witch hunt against GPs. This isn't anything personal to GPs. It is personal to us because our quality of life is compromised. And if you take it personally, it's not a us problem, it's a you problem. And it is something that they need to take upon themselves to make the time for their training. As someone who's worked for the NHS, I know and understand that we have an element of statutory and mandatory training. And then there's optional ones too. And I appreciate that there's so many different variations of training that GPs need to do. But I think they need to start actually thinking outside of the box and really considering listening to female patients who are saying, these are the symptoms that I'm presenting, because long gone are the days where women stay quiet now and suffer in silence. So if you are a GP and you take this personally, I'm not sorry. So I am going to stop up until the GnRH analog part of the treatment, because that's where I am at. Because after that, it basically accelerates to a little bit more invasive, which is things like hysterectomy or an oophorectomy. But with that, that's a completely different ballgame. I've never experienced it, and I don't feel like I'm in a position to be able to comment because I'm not there. I've not had a hysterectomy. I haven't considered it. I haven't had my ovaries removed, i.e. a oophorectomy. I'm not there. So I think it would be more appropriate for someone that I will invite who has had that experience or has had that treatment and what PMDD looks like for them now since they've had that treatment. But it's not a bed of roses. All of these treatments that you are being offered, they work to a degree. For some people, it's been a dream, but for others, not so much. And it is so individual to each person. But my focus for this episode had been giving you a background and an insight on what these treatment pathways look like, what it can do for you, the benefits, and if it's suitable for you or not. If you have any questions, please DM me and I'll do my best to be able to answer it. But I will be able to signpost you or send you a link for the treatment pathway for you to be able to follow or navigate so you can understand in your own time and process what the stages are, what does that look like, what will it look like for you. And sometimes you just need that kind of friendly person or that voice of support or voice of reason to be able to say, actually, it is okay to do that. I'm not too sure about that one. And just to deliberate. And a lot of women do that with me in my DMs. So if you feel like this is something that will be helpful for you to be able to navigate, feel free to send me a DM and then I will do my very best to be able to support you in understanding how to navigate it.